If you know me even a little bit, you know that I analyze anything and everything I watch. I'm a filmmaker and I've hung out with filmmakers. I was asked once who my director inspiration was and I didn't really have an answer. They were delighted to find out that I didn't pull inspiration from Wes Anderson. Most young filmmakers will tell you that Wes Anderson is their magnum opus. And I'm somewhat of a disgrace when it comes to films I've watched. I had never seen a live-action Wes Anderson film, so I figured it was finally time to go through his catalog.
Part 1. Bottle Rocket, 1996. 3 inexperienced men try to become heist men, and as they go on the run, realize they don't know the first thing about white-collar crime. It immediately has a sense of childlike wonder and happiness. The adults act like kids, and the kids act like adults. Wes Anderson uses bright color and crude, childlike drawings to detract from the violence and adult language. Follow Anthony, Dignan, and Bob, each slipping out of crime in their own ways. Anthony falls in love with a housekeeping maid. Dignan has no one that wants to heist with him, and Bob's brother gets arrested, causing Bob to head home. I felt like there were a lot of pacing issues, which attracts from the themes of selflessness, friendship, and love. I had trouble connecting to the characters as the dialogue feels worthless at times.
It's great how you're able to bring her into life like this. Just a little touch.
Dialogue isn't everything. There are many factors into making a worthwhile character, but nothing really lets me cling to anyone. Dignan was the most compelling character with his determination and need to be the center of attention, but even those points felt glossed over. For a first film, it felt how a first feature-length film would be, having a story to tell, but the meaning gets lost between all the cool things you want to do. Part 2. Rushmore, 1998. Max is an overambitious kid who goes to an expensive prep school called Rushmore. Max befriends an investor of Rushmore and falls in love with a teacher from the school. But when Max gets rejected by Rosemary and Herman ends up dating her instead, it creates a divide between them. However, when Rosemary ends up dumping Herman too, Max helps Herman seek after Rosemary in hopes that she'll date him again. This is a coming-of-age story, Max Fisher becoming a young man. However, I felt the pacing issues again as Max spent so long being an asshole that by the last 10 minutes I didn't care that he was a changed person. It felt like the jerk ending up getting everything he wanted despite his horrible actions. This was supposed to be about the friendship Max and Herman had, but because they spent so long getting revenge on each other and chasing after this woman that clearly wasn't interested, made it feel exhausting. The side characters seem more compelling than the protagonist a lot of the time. Wes Anderson seems to write a lot of his main characters as aloof and ditzy, where the people around him have a bit more sense to him. But in this case, makes sense since he's a 15-year-old boy interacting with adults.
Oh my God! I wrote a hit play! And I'm in love with you.
To be honest, this was my least favorite film of his, because Rosemary felt written off every time she tried to be her own person, as someone that needed to be in love. And she ended up giving in to the whims of Max and Herman, which just gave me a headache. Part 3. The Royal Tenenbaums, 2001. Royal Tenenbaum and his wife Etheline had 3 kids, Chaz, Richie, and Margot, and then separated soon after. Etheline raised the kids by herself, while Royal Tenenbaum was a distant father and never truly supported his kids. But when Etheline becomes interested in another man, Royal Tenenbaum feels inclined to interfere and tries wiggling his way back into his wife and kids' life. I have to be honest, this was my absolute favorite film out of all of Wes Anderson's. This story is about mending a family back together. While they may have issues, they must rely on each other to be strong. Richie owns a bird and he sets him free because he didn't like the thought of birds in cages, and later the bird returns to him with white feathers, or signs of stress as Richie says. This reflects on Richie and the family as a whole, as Richie now owns scars from his suicide attempt, and the family as a whole has scars, but in the end, return to the family with a stronger bond for each other. The pacing felt really good, and it's a clear story, but told in a Wes Anderson kind of way. The visuals, as always, are stunning and colorful, and the voiceover tells a lot without feeling overbearing and impressioning the viewer in any certain way. The story hit me in a particular spot, as I have had issues with my family, but I have since come around and been stronger than ever with my parents and siblings. We all hold our own scars, but we have thrived on the company of each other. Chaz's story hit me particularly hard, as he held the biggest grudge against his father, as he himself has had a traumatic year since his wife passed away, and is since overprotective of his boys. Royal Tenenbaum reminds me a bit of my father, as he has always been distant and has struggled to be there for us in certain ways. Royal Tenenbaum wants to set things right with his wife and kids. In the end, Chaz is the one closest to his dad, and it tugged at my heartstrings in a way I did not expect, considering my feelings towards Wes Anderson's first 2 films. Part 4. Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, 2004. Steve Zissou is an oceanographer who stages his life at sea to make documentaries. However, on one of their shooting days, Steve Zissou's partner got devoured by a jaguar shark and wants to find it again and blow it up. In Steve's new journey out to sea, he is joined with a man named Ned who believes Steve Zissou is his father. This is a story of a selfish marine explorer who's dependent on everyone liking him, but he soon realizes that he's just a crazy old man who doesn't have any friends. He learns to be selfless and truly there for his crew, and he realizes that his crew are his best friends, and does whatever it takes to protect his crew and his ship. Steve Zissou learns to let go of his anger towards the jaguar shark, and instead just wants to find it again. Upon finding it, and on the verge of tears, he asks himself and the crew if he thinks the shark would remember him. This more reflects on Steve wanting the people in his life to remember him when he's gone. Wes Anderson used a set of the boat they're working on to have some beautiful camera work of them walking through the rooms in the ship. It has a wonderful stage feeling to it, and I appreciate that style choice. The story was well written, and while it didn't hit me as hard as the previous film, you can see that Wes Anderson is finding a clear style and is finding his stride in script writing. Part 5. The Darjeeling Limited, 2007. 3 brothers, Francis, Peter, and Jack, unite for a trip after a year of not speaking. Their father passed away, and their mother didn't come to the funeral. Francis is recovering from a motorcycle accident. Peter doesn't know how to cope with his wife's pregnancy, and Jack is struggling to get over his ex-lover. Peter and Jack don't know why they're on their trip, and Francis reveals that they're going to confront their mother. I don't have as much to say about this one. It didn't irritate me, but it didn't interest me either. The story comes in broad and vague strokes. I've noticed a pattern in Wes Anderson not giving a clear direction of the story as you're watching it, which, in some cases, is exciting. Sometimes it leads to a wonderful storyline, or a confusing one. It's definitely refreshing to not know where it's going, but there's unpredictability, and then there's messy. This one wasn't the messiest by far, but what I did find messy was a lack of characters you get interested in, and I feel his biggest weak point is bulking up a character to become real to the viewer. The 180 line. What I do find interesting is Wes Anderson willing to break some rules of filmmaking. He's constantly crossing the 180 line, but it doesn't feel super jarring. If you don't know what the 180 line is, there's an unspoken rule about filmmaking where you don't cross the 180 line. When you set up a scene, you place a camera in a certain area, and then you don't cross the line behind it. But as you watch Wes Anderson, you see that he's constantly facing characters across from each other and flipping the camera. The reason people tell you not to cross a line is it becomes jarring for the audience, but in most cases, Wes Anderson can cross the line and make it not feel jarring, which is incredibly admirable that he's able to pull that off. Part 6. Fantastic Mr. Fox, 2009. Mr. Fox can't help his wild animal instincts and always wants to outsmart the dumb humans. But as always, your secret pleasure will end up ruining other people's lives. Mr. Fox realizes he needs to sacrifice his ego and himself for the other animals and his family in order for them to live, which instead leads into all of them working together. We learn that there's something fantastic in being different. It's a story about being aware of the neighbors around you, and even if you don't particularly get along, it's good to appreciate them as best you can. Each animal plays off their own strengths and outsmarts the men every time. And to this day, men are left waiting to try and outsmart Mr. Fox. Everyone say it with me. Stop motion. I admire any film that does stop motion, especially when it's done well. 10 minutes into the film and you're already charmed as cuss. To be fair, I've watched this many years ago and remember liking it, but I've forgotten a lot about it and didn't fully realize it was a Wes Anderson film at the time. But after rewatching it, it's a charming story set in a fantastical world. This medium is where I think Wes Anderson shines the most. He's able to make everything as fantastical as he wants, and it feels fitting with the children's story and the fact that it's animated. The story feels fitting for what the world's been going through, as it ends with a speech from Mr. Fox about how the food they're eating is artificial, and not exactly what they're looking for. but at least they can eat with each other, and at least they have stars on them. Part 7, Moonrise Kingdom, 2012. This film starts out as a boy who runs away from a scout camp. He's an orphan and seems unloved by his foster family. Everyone seems to call him insane and crazy, but it looks as if he's in love with Susie Bishop. Sam and Susie plan a day to run away together on this island they live on. They're both troubled kids with anger issues, and rely on each other for the support they need. They create their own land and call it Moonrise Kingdom. They each wish for each other's lives, especially Susie, who reads a lot of books, and they all seem to be orphans. She views their lives as more special. It's a coming-of-age story about two kids who fall in love and try all the romantic things they've heard about. Susie's parents obviously disagree with their runaway scheme, and order her to never see Sam again. Meanwhile, Sam finds out that his foster parents don't wish for him to come home. Sam's khaki troops start to feel sorry for him, and help Sam and Susie run away again. They end up getting married, but their runaway doesn't go to plan when the biggest storm of the island comes and they get discovered. Sam moves in with Bruce Willis, and Sam and Susie will likely be friends for a very long time. I like the visuals in this, and the story felt clear-cut enough to follow. However, there was something left to be desired for this one. Wes Anderson seems to write his characters a little too flat for my taste, where they say what they mean, and there's not much deeper than that. In some circumstances, especially for comedy, it works. But when I want a story that makes me want to feel for these characters in love, in pain, or bravery, I want to feel it in myself as I watch it. I merely feel like I'm being retold the story afterwards, with a lot less spark to it. Part 8, The Grand Budapest Hotel, 2014. A young writer grows interested in the owner of the Grand Budapest Hotel, and they sit down for dinner for the writer to learn more about this esteemed man who owns the place they all live. We start out with the original owner of the hotel, a particular and passionate man that loves the hotel he works at, and in love with an older woman. Zero, the current owner of the hotel, is the lobby boy we see in the flashbacks, recalling the job he had under Gustav's wing. The woman Gustav was sleeping with at the time just died, and they went to her estate to find many people hoping she wrote them into her will, but they discovered that a painting, Boy with Apple, was given to Gustav. Zero and Gustav make a blood pact to sell the painting as soon as possible, run away from the country amidst the war, and then return to their jobs once it's over. But this plan soon becomes soiled, as Gustav's mistress was murdered, and the police think he did it. Gustav goes to prison and gets asked by some inmates to help them escape. We backtrack to Zero's relationship with Agatha, where she helped bake tools into cookies to help Gustav. This leads to his escape, and reveals the past of what truly happened to his mistress, Gustav, and Agatha. I think this is my second favorite live-action film of his. Not as touching to me as The Royal Tenenbaums, but it carries a lot of the same energy, and the writing style is more what I like. A clear narrative story and ends on a solemn yet poignant note. Part 9, Isle of Dogs, 2018. All canines are exiled to Trash Island due to all of them getting the dog flu and snout fever. Now, I watched this one when it came out. I remembered liking it, and upon rewatching it, it's still an amazing film. It's crazy when watching it during everything going on because it's about a pandemic, and we're living in one right now. And the events in the story seem less and less crazy. This film has three main storylines: the plight of the dogs, Atari trying to find his dog spots, and the political issues revolving around the dog flu. We're introduced to a group of dogs who fight any other dog that want their food. They see Atari crash his plane and go to investigate, and they soon discover that he's looking for his dog. All humans speak in Japanese unless there's a translator present, which really puts us in the perspective of the dogs, as they speak in English. The whole story is about the journey for Atari to find his dog, and Chief discovering that he doesn't need to be a stray. Atari and Chief start relating to each other as they both feel like stray dogs, and they create a strong bond. In the end, Chief is Atari's new dog, and the dogs return to the mainland to be cured. This story holds a lot of real political standpoints, while still keeping it rather light. I admire that Wes Anderson took on such a heavy topic, placed it in the context of something almost childlike. This film is super charming and kept me intrigued the entire time. I think a big reason is because I love dogs so much, but it is also just a well-told story, and I can't help but love stop motion.
I think stop motion is where Wes Anderson shines the most. His stories have been consistently better in this format. and I think it's because he knows he's appealing to a younger audience, and that gives it more childlike wonder and matches the tone of all of his other films. I think his strongest points are art direction, sound design, and cinematography. In a lot of the cases, the story felt lackluster and underwritten. Maybe for someone else, they feel fine. Dare I say, quirky and charming. But at the end of the day, without a good story, the visuals are all you're really left looking for. It's safe to say Wes Anderson is an important figure in the filmmaking world. He has a lot to pull inspiration from, and I think he's a fine creator to look up to. I didn't love all his films to death, but they felt like films. It felt like there was a man with a vision and a tight-knit crew that wanted to make something, and even that is something I admire. I admire seeing actors from previous films pop up again in the films he's making now. It shows they like working with him. Some even write with him. And I love the thought of him and his friends wanting to tell a story. I admire anyone who wants to make something different.